Welcome back. We have Rich Tripp here with us tonight. We're so grateful that you're willing to dive in. We're going to jump into social media. And you work with youth a lot. I wanted to just ask your own personal thoughts, experiences, research. And this is also something so prevalent in our society, and it seems to just be getting more prevalent. And so I just want to pick your brain.
Yeah. No, this is exciting. As you said, we've talked about pornography, but I mean, it's so much more broad when we talk about social media and media in general and media use. And so, yeah, there's kind of a lot to it, but good things to be aware of. I think, just kind of starting with like some of the stats, like how prevalent is it? What's going on? The research that I was able to find recently. So teens spend about 7.5 to 8.5 hours a day on media. See
that I remember, researching this maybe 6 years ago, and it was like, it's 2 to 4 hours, You're telling me 8 hours.
Depending on the research, somewhere between 7.5 and 8.5 hours.
8.5
Actually,
hours.
A little bit more than 8.5.
How are they, like, where's this time coming from? Is it because so many schools are allowing cell phones in school? You know what I mean? Like, I'm just trying to figure out, like, how do you fit that time in?
I think we're seeing more increases since 2020 as well, because in the day and age of COVID, like you're talking hours and hours, whether it's in school, for entertainment, for fun or whatever. And so I think we're seeing a lot more increases because of that. And that's probably with everybody that we're all kind of locked away. It was a lot harder to socialize. And so we're hopping on to the devices and our ability to connect with people. Right. And so I think that's a factor. And I think we just are seeing more and more kids that like they're able to do that. And maybe parents just are kind of like not even aware of how much time they're spending on that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and the media kind of is across the board. From the research that I saw, the biggest use of time was TV and videos, and YouTube being kind of the primary thing. Like so many people just watching YouTube videos. And I've seen that in my practice a lot too. I've worked with college age kids that are like, I'm pretty much losing my scholarship and failing my class. I'm like, well, what are you doing with your time? It's a lot of YouTube videos and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, okay. Again, YouTube is not horrible, but like
what? I mean, when it gets to that level, we were talking about what addictions are and what they're not in our last episode. When it's getting in the way of something like that, it like, would you consider that like, hey, you're pretty...
Yeah, I would say...
This is affecting your life on many facets.
Again, I don't know if I term it an addiction, but it meets most of the criteria. It's hard, like diagnostically, if I'm staying true to the diagnostic manual, there's not criteria for an addiction for social media or media in general. But if you look at the behavior, it's highly addictive. And I've seen kids who've threatened to take their own lives if their parents delete their Instagram account, or something like that. And so when it's getting to that level of distress, if you're taking away their social media or video games, which video games is number 2 after TV and videos, a lot of gaming. If it becomes that, I think Fortnite probably is still popular at times, but back in the day, I talked with doctors where kids were getting sick and getting like urinary tract infections because they would just urinate in their pants because they didn't want to get up to go to the bathroom.
My God.
And so, and wouldn't eat very much like it. So when you get to that level, without the criteria, I'd still classify it as an addiction.
Wow.
At that point.
Wow. And I think we think of addictions like, there's, alcoholic, that you can be addicted to alcoholism or this or this or this. And I feel like, this is such a new form. Truly, this has only been around, not very long, as in considering of research that we have on all different topics. And so I think that's what's hard is that we're experiencing and living this as the research is being understood about that. And I feel like this generation has kind of been these really unfortunate guinea pigs of it's like, well, we didn't know that it could have all of these mental health concerns and issues and consequences and everything. So,
and it is constant over and over dopamine hits. And, that feeling of getting that dopamine hit can become very addictive. Like, it's like, oh, this feels good. And this feels good. And, I've talked with people on TikTok, and it's just these quick videos, but then it's the next one, and then it's the next one. And it just is this
doom
constant
scrolling of just going and going and going. Interesting.
And so, it just becomes problematic that way. So TV and videos, I think, were the top one. Gaming was the second, and then social media, which, would be Instagram and TikTok and Snapchat, and those are all, really prevalent at this point. I don't know any teenagers that are on Facebook anymore. That's all for us old people. Well, I speak for myself, not for you. But that's for all of us. We're on Facebook and that kind of thing. But mostly Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and YouTube are the big ones.
How have you seen, you've been in this industry, for over a decade at this point. How have you seen that change over the years?
Good question. I think a lot of it is I'm seeing kids younger and younger who are starting to get involved. And I think just how all consuming it becomes for all of those. Not all, that's an absolute, but for many of those that are involved, it's
in it.
Yeah, it's pretty consuming of time and attention. And
the hard thing is traditionally, you'd have your community and it's like, you'd interact with, truly not tons of people at an everyday sort of basis. And you're being, interacting and being told what is socially acceptable, not socially acceptable by those people directly around you. And then you turn into a world of social media, and that pool has increased 10 or 1,000 or 100,000 fold, where all of a sudden I just think these poor kids that are then feeling like they're now being on a platform, being judged by who knows how many hundreds of people. Like that is so hard. That is so hard.
Think about junior high and high school as it was.
I know.
It's already challenging. And it is this interesting paradox, I think, of like connecting virtually with so many people and yet not really connecting with anyone much at all.
Yes.
And sometimes for a lot of people, a lot of individuals, like that is their only connection. They might come home from school and lock themselves in their room, and that becomes their connection. They might not, when their parents are around, or maybe they don't want to interact with their family. And
and that is their only form. And where it's truly, that is not a human interaction, a true, you think of how important eye contact is and body language and so many things of having a relationship. But I think we've told, society has praised this, how many likes are you getting? How many hearts are you getting? It's like someone to use their finger and push a button does not mean that they actually are your friend.
Is completely different from like a hug from a friend or
a friend that shows up for you when you need them and will listen to you when in the hard times. And man,
so
wow.
It's going to be big. I mean, media, just like anything else, can be a beautiful tool to use and can be
There's positives
wonderful
and negatives. Yes.
But, it can also damage a lot of things too. And unfortunately, I think particularly with teenagers, we're seeing more and more of them that, like you said, are just not prepared to be able to navigate what all is out there. And, we're just kind of talking about the general stuff of being judged and not having as strong connections, but then you get to like the really dark stuff that can come into play. And that's even scarier.
You're talking like online predators and stuff like
predators.
What is your experience as far as seeing this and the effects and the reality?
I've had quite a few clients that I've worked with. I've had a handful that, start connecting with someone that they meet online, and then some inappropriate sexting or something goes on. And then all of a sudden they get a text from someone that says, we're going to show this to everybody on your account if you don't give us money. Ooh. And I mean, and I like, that's happened as recently within the last couple of weeks. I've talked with someone that occurred to. And I know we've had some news stories, like even in our area, and I don't think it's just our area, but that, I mean, we're seeing kids who are suiciding because they feel so much shame, and they're being catfished, and they're being blackmailed, and you know, we're losing kids to this in a lot of ways.
And it's I mean, I even heard the analogy, because that dopamine is so real and it's happening and it's calculatable. The analogy I heard, it was like, yeah, you know, do we realize that when we hand a child a cell phone with social media, it's almost, you know, as if it's like, here's your, you know, your drip system.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, here's your drugs and here's your drip system. You know, it's like, we don't realize that, like that, you know, that's really, and I feel like even when social media first came out to now, the algorithms, the technology that has been poured into this to truly make it addicting, like that's the goal, right? Yeah. Is to keep you on there as long as possible. Mm-hmm. And so when, I don't know, I just feel like parents were almost behind the curve of like, wow, this just went way faster than we were anticipating as far as how advanced it got. And we're kind of behind the 8 ball right now going, how did this happen? Now you have all these girls. I mean, you have so many mental health concerns, anxiety and depression and all of these things. And now people are saying, oh yeah, let's look at the research. This is coming down to social media and this is coming down. And you know, it's devastating.
Yeah. So you have what I would call maybe more of the benign things that are happening, which is, you know, ads and, you know, tracking and all the algorithms, but then, you know, some of the more nefarious things that are going on. I have a really good friend who's retired from the FBI, and he came and talked with all the youth that we had in our church and to the parents. And I remember him, and I will never forget this. He said, no good parent would ever let their kids go into their room with a phone overnight.
Wow.
And then just told various stories of how predators have contacted children, taken advantage of them, and some of these kids just get pulled in. It starts with one little thing, and it's like, well, if you don't do this next little thing, I'm going to tell your parents that you did this. And then they're scared, so they do the next thing. And then pretty soon they have them hooked, line and sinker into that.
So sad.
Doing horrible things that they would never want to do. And it's like it can be vicious.
Manipulation to the max.
Yeah. So those are the dark side. I mean, and obviously that's not going to happen to every child, but it is happening. I mean, for me to have, like, within probably 5-6 years, at least a handful of people who've been blackmailed, same exact MO, the same, like, it happens the same way every time. Mm-hmm. And that's just me with people that I'm working with.
Yeah.
And so,
like, full blackmail is pretty extreme. You know, it's not, I mean, there's obviously levels of things but if it's like, if you don't chalk up this much money to me, this is what's going to happen to you. Yeah. Like, I mean, if that's not incentive enough to, like, not get involved in things like this, I don't know.
Well, and I'll tell you, like, particularly for mothers and for parents, talk to your kids about this. Mm-hmm. I would really recommend just saying, hey, you know what? This stuff happens. And you know what? Even if you do something dumb, come and talk to me before it gets worse. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to sell you or beat you or anything like that. Like, we love you and we care about you.
We're here for you.
But come and talk to us. I was so grateful. So my 13-year-old son, he was probably 12 at the time, we heard the news article on the radio as we were driving. So I just turned off the radio. I'm like, did you understand what just happened there? And so we had a full on talk, and I'm like, all right, even if you do something dumb, buddy, like, I'm here. I get it. I was a teenager. You do dumb things, but, like, we don't want it to lead to this. And this is where it could lead. And so let's talk about what's out there.
That's so smart. And show them, like, here's the risk. And I think especially before we hand a child a phone.
Yeah.
It's like, do you trust them to be able to self-regulate, to emotionally self-regulate?
Yeah.
Because if you cannot trust that and you're handing them dopamine, like what truly, where's it going to go? Right. And
Nowhere
not saying
good.
that, and not saying that every kid can, regulate themselves at all times perfectly. And what I mean? But it's like to have that skill before you hand them something that has so much risk associated with it. I mean, yeah.
And I think it's also good, even after a couple of months, take the phone away for a week
And
see how they respond. And I mean, if they flip out and they can't survive, it's probably a pretty good indicator that they're not ready for those devices. Or, if they're like, oh man, and then all of a sudden they're out playing or interacting with friends.
It's like, okay, they're probably not dependent on it, because that's what we don't want, right? We don't want the cell phone to be a dependence, because then it's a crutch, and then it's hurting them long term. Yeah, I think that's smart. Do you have any advice on how to, I guess, like safely incorporate a phone or social media? I know that there's so many ways that people look at it, and every family is different. What they value is different. So this is not a one size fit all, but I know there's some that are like, oh yeah, every kid that turns 10 should have a cell phone, and here you go. And there's, it's their life, and there's no parameters, and there's no filters, and there's nothing. I've heard that all the way to, I'm not letting my kid have social media until they're out of my house. And I mean, those are both extreme ways, right? And to where it's like, okay, but if they're 18 and if they're going to leave your house and then get social media, and then you haven't taught them how to navigate that and what that anyway, are there best practices as you being, a professional in the setting, seeing youth all the time go through this? Yeah,
from what I've seen, and like you said, it does vary based on where parents are, and I can respect both sides of the thing. I do want to say, you want to be, if you're handing a 10-year-old a phone with no filters, no parameters, you might as well take them to the Strip in Vegas and just drop them off in Vegas for a while. Like, I mean, because
but I mean, that's
it's about as
like,
safe. Well, I mean, virtually,
yes,
there's just so much that can come in. But yeah, I would just say that a lot of it can depend on the child. A lot of it depends on the family. I know personally, our 10-year-old has a phone, like a watch phone, so we can see where she's at. She can do some text messaging. We feel great about that. The rest of our kids do have smartphones. We know the iPhone platform so much better than any other device, and it works better for us. So we've put the parameters on there, and there are great apps, and I can include just, some that I just recently picked up from a Google search, but just of different types of apps and stuff that we can use. I
would love that.
Whether it's blocking certain things, whether it's tracking, whether it's letting you know how much time they spend on it, there are a lot of things.
That would be so helpful. That way. I think that is so helpful. And realizing, like you said, every kid is different. And I think even like, if you have 2 kids, you might feel comfortable giving, your first child one at a certain age, and the second child it's okay to be like, you know what? You're not ready for this, and we're going to wait another year or another 2 years, or, I don't think we have to pigeonhole like, this is what we're going to do. And this is like, be able to really understand that child, their abilities to handle technology, and tailor everything. Until I'm really open with my kids. It's like, this is not, we do not deal everything equally, as in how we go about things, because every single human being has such different strengths and weaknesses. We need to tailor what we're trying to do to help you be successful to you and not to anybody else.
Fairness is not a rule in our house.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Life is not fair. And, you're going to hear complaints if it is kind of different standards that you have. But I think, just helping the one child that's complaining, be like, listen, when you can prove you're responsible, we can talk about having a phone. And so, being able to negotiate that is good. And there are great phone contracts that you can get with kids where it's like, here are the boundaries that we're going to have, and here's what's going to happen if you break those rules or break that contract. And so I think the more specifics we can give our kids, so they know what is going to allow them to keep their phone and what's going to, make it so that they lose those privileges,
Yes.
then they're better able to navigate that.
And I think that's really wise, because if you can say that up front, it doesn't feel this, oh, my parents just punishing me again because of blah, blah, blah. It's like, hey, this was like, especially if you can do it without emotion of the raw, or I'm angry, you've overstepped your lines. If it's like, I'm so sorry that this happened.
Yeah.
This is what we agreed upon. And I can tell that's not being honored anymore. This is what's going to need to happen because of it.
Yeah.
It can be so simple.
No, and I use it. Sometimes I'm like, I am so sorry that you chose to give up your phone based on those choices. Well, we'll just keep it for a while. You can work to get it back, but it's not my choice. We had this contract.
Yeah,
it wasn't like I woke up and said, I'm going to take their phone.
I'm going to take their phone away. This is what I want to have happen. It's like, this was already decided on, we came together. This was already agreed upon. Yeah. I think that's because I know there's so many battles. I think with parents, the media thing is so real. How do I get my kid to not be playing as many video games? How do I get them off social media? I think as parents to realize you 100% and foremost, you are a parent. And lots of parents, it's like, well, I want to be their best friend. It's like, being a friend is good, but foremost, you are a parent in their life. And that's what they need. They need you as a parent to be able to set those healthy boundaries and help them thrive, because kids do thrive better with understood boundaries, and so giving them that ability.
And I was just going to say, let's be honest, as parents, most of us probably could use some boundaries for ourselves with social media, and
True.
Our kids are watching. And so if we're modeling, just flipping through, and, I know there are certain days where we don't have much going on and everyone's kind of doing their own thing. And we're kind of all just sitting on the couch with our phones, looking at, various things that, like, we can be aware of ourselves first and foremost. And can we help, model healthy behavior with those things.
Yes. And with kids, even understanding, as a mother, how important eye contact is. And there's so many times I catch myself and I'm doing who knows what. I could be doing anything from grocery shopping to checking in on a person that I just, my friend that's going through a hard time. My kids don't know that, but what matters is in that moment, I'm looking at them through a phone and I have to. There's so many times that I'll just tell myself, I'm not even gonna have my phone on me, on my person, because I don't want that to be in between the relationship with me and my child. I want to be able to show them that, like, I can have that eye contact. I can be fully present. And that is hard when you have so many, dings and distractions that are happening from a phone. So, wow. Okay. Is there anything else that you would want to share as far as social media goes? I'm
just trying to think. So, if you want to learn a little bit more about social media's effect on teenagers, and again, this is kind of the best research that I've seen so far. Jean Twenge wrote a book called iGen.
Okay. I've heard of this.
And you kind of mentioned some of the things about depression and anxiety increasing, and really, and the way she described it, there's a correlation between the amount of teenagers who had smartphones to an increase of anxiety and depression. And I think anybody who's gone through social sciences, correlation is not causation.
Yes.
However, when you see strong correlations, it's probably good to take notice and maybe do a little informal research within your own family and just kind of recognize that. But, and from what I've seen too, the more that someone is using social media, you see more isolation. They're locking themselves away. There is more anxiety and depression. We've talked about comparisons. We've talked about the need for validation, and it's constantly, and you get all of this going on. And as it persists, then when they step out into the real world, really they haven't had an opportunity or given themselves an opportunity to accomplish or achieve real life things. And that's pretty depressing too. And so, not only is it depressing being engaged in it at times,
but they're missing
what it
out.
creates with life
Yeah.
makes it really hard. And so it almost becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy of like, well, I don't really have any friends, and this is the only way I can turn to friends, and my life really isn't very good. And so, yeah, we just want to be careful as much as we can, encourage our teenagers to live life.
To live that life.
And so,
wow, I was a part of a study years and years ago, and it was thousands and thousands of males and females. And it was interesting because when we got the data years after that, it took a while to synthesize everything. But it did this specific part of it did not apply to men, but for women, they said that the longer amount of time that a woman spent on social media was directly inversely correlated with her self-esteem. Mm-hmm. And that was maybe 13 years ago. And I remember looking at that and being like, well, I don't want that a part of my life. Yeah. Like, why would I have, if I know that has such a direct effect on my own self-esteem as a human, like, why would I want that prevalent in my life, And so I very much stepped away in many, if not almost all regards, because it was like, why put yourself in that? But again, there's so many beautiful things that can happen with social media as well, but just realizing the true risk of what's there. I heard this really, really unfortunate story. This was not 18. This was an adult. This was a woman. She was very, she's popular. And she was asked the question, would you rather have a deep, fulfilling relationship with partner? Or would you rather keep your social media following? Mm-hmm. And she chose her social media following.
Yeah. Doesn't
and
surprise
it was
me.
like, and this was long-term, like for into perpetuity until you die. Which one would you choose?
Yeah.
To have a loving, lasting relationship with someone that you care about, or to keep your following? And it was the following.
It's sad.
And that was really surprising to me because I guess I just haven't been in that world for so long. I just didn't realize how much that meant to people. Mm-hmm. And that reality was really shocking to me.
I think a lot of times we're kind of trading real life for just virtual pixelated life, avatars and different things. And that can be really sad because it's good to get likes and maybe you could go viral or whatever and be a super amazing influencer, but it's rarely does that occur for people. And it's not super fulfilling most of the time.
Yeah.
And so, it's kind of sad. And I love that you brought up that there are so many good things. Like it really is a tool. We can use it for good, but are we using it for good really is the question.
Yeah. And how much of the time that you're using it, could we rate ourselves, like, okay, this is how much time I'm using it. Is this, and really, I think even as moms, it's like to really genuinely look at yourself and say, is this serving me? Mm-hmm. If I spend, 30 minutes on this versus 30 minutes calling up a friend and genuinely asking how they're doing, how their day's going, what's going on in their life. You can take time connecting in so many regards. And is social media genuinely doing what you want it to do for you in your life? Is it helping you feel more fulfilled, more connected, a better person, more happy? And if it's not serving you, like reevaluate maybe, what's happening.
A little over a month ago, I deleted my Instagram account because I noticed myself just getting stuck scrolling and the amount of time I would spend. And I'm like, I'm following my favorite sports teams, or whatever it is. And I'm like, it's been really kind of nice to not have that. Now this is the scary thing. Like it was always so automatic. Like, whenever I would go and look at things, like my thumb will still try to go to the Instagram app at times because it just was repeated so much.
It's like it's
but,
right there.
But yeah, it's been liberating to not be tuned into that all the time.
Into that. Yeah. And I think for anyone that's wanting, I don't know, help, I guess, or a tip in this regard, this is something that I heard, we know nature can be very healing. But I was looking into this study that had some really profound results as far as resetting people that have gone through, either anxiety, depression, all these things. And it was simple. It seems so simple, but they would take them out into a full nature experience for 3 days. No electricity, electronics at all for 3 days. And it's like life-changing for these people. Yeah. I'm like, that's it. Like you go 3 days in the wilderness but there's something about that disconnecting, that is so freeing. And I think being able to get our youth out in nature is so needed. And sometimes it's really hard to do that, especially if you're living in an inner city situation and stuff. But being able to help them find those experiences, I think can really help.
Oh, for sure. So I've always thought it'd be great if we could send every junior high schooler to a farm for a couple of years, get them away from their cell phones, let them work, be out there in nature. And I think it would be a wonderful experience for most of them.
And yet so many of us, so few people have that experience, right? But it could do a lot of good. So anyway, in wrapping up, do you have any other thoughts that you want to share with moms in regards to social media or in general, in just any encouragement?
Yeah. So a couple of things maybe to approach it. And particularly if you have young children who are not on it yet, this is a little bit easier. Have a no social media policy for your family until your kids are at least 18. Now, I know the idea is like, well, will they be able to handle it once they finally get it? But if we can get them through at least to 18, the hope is that, they have a little bit more skills. They've learned a few more life lessons. And I know the brain doesn't fully develop to like mid-20s.
But at least it's developed more at 18 than 12.
Yeah. And that's what I told my kids. I asked my 16-year-old daughter tonight, because I'm like, I'm going to come talk about this. What social media apps do you have? And she's like, I don't think I have any. I'm like, you don't have any, like really testing her. And I think she's on Be Real or something that my wife, her mother let her be on. But other than that, like we haven't had fights. She knows that. And, there are a couple of, group messaging apps or something that they might be on. But other than that, like they're not necessarily dying. My kids are still alive and they're doing okay.
You have an amazing family. It's like, hey, they're thriving. So,
and I have heard like, but we need them to connect and we need an Instagram account or whatever. Then I would say create a family one that everybody can have access to, and then just be like, tell your kids, hey, tell your friends no inappropriate stuff because mom and dad are going to see all the stuff that's posted on here, and just if you kind of keep it that way, then it can be helpful. Now, ideally that works out. It's a little bit harder, but I think if you set up some of those parameters with the phones to where they can't download certain things without your permission, it's a little bit easier to keep them from, getting the Snapchats and the TikToks and all those things. But it's easier to start early on than to have a 17-year-old that you're like, we're going off of social media now. And that's been their life.
And then pulling that in. And like you said, some of these kids, it's like, but this has become my life and almost my only life and my lifeline. And it's replaced reality for them. So it can be very, very, very hard. And I think even the moms right now that are raising kids, it's like what social media looked like 10 years ago is so different. Like I don't think we realize how much sexting is happening, how advanced predators have become. Like this world has advanced so rapidly, and I don't think we even know the extent of that. And the bullying too. Yeah,
there was a great news segment, and this was, I think, 2016, but a teacher asked her students, what my parents don't know about social media is, and it was surprising enough that it made the news, but sexting, nudes, pornography, bullying, there were just so many things that were going on. And a lot of times we know it can happen, but we don't necessarily think that it's happening within our own homes. And And so a little bit more awareness, finding that balance of what works for your family is always important.
And realizing really quick on the bullying side of things where, I mean, just letting your child know, it's like people will act differently when they're hiding behind a screen, when their face isn't known this. And then to realize that there's a lot out there that are bots. They're not even real people that are regurgitating things or coming after people and stuff. And I mean, even that, how can a kid comprehend that when they're 12? Where it's like, actually, that may not even be a real person that's telling you those things, you know?
I know. It's an interesting world for sure.
It is.
But, you know, again, these are beautiful tools that we can use. You know, I think as we develop and work on our relationships with our children, you know, and for mothers, you know, particularly to keep working and nurturing those relationships as well, it makes it much more easy to navigate these things. And, you know, as parents, we're going to make mistakes too, and we can learn from those mistakes and, you know, and hopefully, you know, be able to help strengthen our families and help our children navigate this. Yes. Sometimes they can help us too.
Yeah, so that's right.
It's a beautiful experience.
Again, like there's hope from everything that you were saying, you know, last episode to this episode. I mean, if there's that much hope with those types of addictions, I'm sure there's just as much hope with these, you know, with things that kids can be super involved in. Like there's hope to be able to help them navigate and process these things that they're going through.
Yeah. So. I think, you know, just really quickly, even if we're talking about kids who are addicted, they might say that they can't live without their devices and social media, but you know, I don't know of anyone who just like dropped over dead because they didn't have access to social media. Now there have been some that, you know, were so tied to it that there has been suicide. And so obviously you want to be careful in terms of mental health, you know, trying to gauge that. Yeah. But yeah, for a lot of them, maybe a break from the technology is good. So
it's a good thing. Yeah. Wow. Anyway. Well, this has been so helpful. I've been so grateful that you're willing to come and talk about these. I mean, some of this has been, you know, these are heavy topics, but we're doing this because we know that what moms do is vital. And I'm just willing to do whatever it takes to help moms feel like they can do this and that they have the tools they need and that they can feel like what they're doing is valuable, and it is. Yeah. And so I'm just so grateful that you're willing to be a part of this tonight.
Super happy. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Thanks for being here tonight, Rich.
Thanks so much.